Everything changed in an instant. The life I knew vanished, leaving only dread and the question, who am I now? I hid in darkness, shrinking from the world, convinced disappearing would be easier than facing my own shame. Alone, I surrendered to silence, believing I was broken, never realizing this ending was the start of something new. One call ended my career and shattered my security, leaving me stunned, betrayed, and falling through empty space. I pretended to be fine, but beneath the mask, fear and shame consumed me as my sense of self unraveled. My world faded to grey. Purpose lost, I drifted through days, unable to move forward or find meaning. My house, which was once my sanctuary, became an echo chamber for my darkest thoughts. The silence was no longer peaceful, it was accusatory. It amplified every fear, every doubt, every negative whisper in my head, until it was a deafening roar. You failed. You're not good enough. You'll never work again. The thoughts circled endlessly, a vicious carousel I couldn't get off. I started to believe them. I started to believe that this was it, that my best days were behind me, and all that was left was this empty, hollow existence. I actively avoided people. When friends texted to ask how I was, I'd reply with a brief, cheerful lie. I'm great, enjoying the time off. The dishonesty felt heavy, but it was easier than admitting the truth. It was easier than having to face their pity or their clumsy attempts to cheer me up. I didn't want to hear that everything happens for a reason, or that when one door closes, another one opens. At that moment, all my doors felt like they had been slammed shut and bolted from the other side. My isolation was self-imposed, but it felt like a necessary defense mechanism. Social media became a minefield of torment. Every post from a friend or former colleague about their career success, their promotion, their exciting new project, felt like a personal attack. I knew it was irrational, but I couldn't help but compare my situation to theirs. Their lives seemed so full of purpose and forward momentum, while mine had ground to a screeching halt. I would scroll and scroll, each happy picture and celebratory status update chipping away at what little self-worth I had left. It was a form of self-torture, but it was one I couldn't seem to stop. The loneliness was a physical ache. It was a cold spot in the middle of my chest that nothing could warm. I longed for connection, but I had pushed everyone away. I had created my own island, and now I was stranded on it. I would have conversations with myself, sometimes out loud, just to hear a voice. The echo chamber I had built was doing its job perfectly. It was reflecting my own misery back at me, convincing me that this was my reality, that I was completely and utterly alone in my failure. There was no one to tell me I was wrong. Weeks turned into a month, and things only got worse. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by a deep, gnawing despair that had become my constant companion. I had stopped even pretending to look for jobs. What was the point? The rejection, or even worse, the silence, was just too much to bear. I felt fragile, like a piece of glass that had been shattered and crudely glued back together. The slightest touch, the smallest pressure, felt like it would break me all over again. So, I did nothing. I chose paralysis as a form of self-preservation. The financial pressure started to mount. I would watch my bank balance dwindle, a tangible measure of my shrinking world and disappearing options. Each bill that arrived in the post felt like a threat, a countdown timer to some unseen catastrophe. The fear was a constant, low-level hum beneath the surface of everything. It made my stomach clench and my heart race. I started to feel a sense of claustrophobia, as if the walls were literally closing in on me. The safety net I thought I had was unravelling thread by thread, and I was falling through the holes. One afternoon, I was standing in the kitchen, staring out at the grey, drizzling rain, when I caught my reflection in the window. I didn't recognize the person staring back at me. Her eyes were vacant, her shoulders slumped in defeat, her face pale and drawn. In that moment, something inside me snapped. It wasn't a sudden surge of strength or a moment of clarity. It was a wave of pure, gut-wrenching hopelessness. I slid down the kitchen cabinets and sat on the cold, hard floor, and for the first time since the phone call, I wept. It wasn't a quiet, dignified cry. It was a raw, ugly, soul-shaking sob that came from the very depths of my being. I cried for my lost job, for my lost confidence, for the future I thought I was going to have. I cried for the person I used to be and the stranger I had become. I cried until I had no tears left, until I was just a heap on the floor, empty and exhausted. It was the lowest point of my entire life. I had hit rock bottom, hard. And as I lay there, in the rubble of my own making, I had no idea that this complete and utter breakdown was the first, painful step towards breaking through. The breakdown on the kitchen floor wasn't the end. It was just the start of long, grey days. Waking up felt like resuming a sentence, not starting anew. My world shrank to the bed, the sofa, the kitchen, and back again. Colour drained from my life. I was just existing, not living. Bone-tired, soul-tired, every single day. The hardest part was pretending. Every interaction felt like a performance, putting on a mask, forcing a smile, faking happiness. But the mask kept slipping, and the effort left me drained and more isolated than before. The gap between who I pretended to be and who I was grew into a vast, terrifying chasm. Eventually, the mask shattered, leaving me exposed and utterly defeated. The nights were honestly the worst. When the distractions of the day faded away, there was nothing left but me and my thoughts. I would lie in bed, just staring up at the dark ceiling, and my mind would go into overdrive. It was in these quiet, lonely hours that the self-doubt was at its most vicious. It was a relentless inner critic, whispering every insecurity, every fear, every failure directly into my ear. You're worthless. You messed everything up. No one wants you. You're a burden to everyone you love. The voice was so loud, so convincing, that I started to believe it was the truth. I would have full-blown arguments with this voice in my head. I'd try to fight back, to find evidence to the contrary, but my confidence was so low that I had no ammunition. The voice always won. It would twist my memories, reframing past successes as flukes and past happiness as a temporary illusion. It painted a picture of a future that was bleak and empty. A long, lonely road leading nowhere. I felt trapped inside my own skull, a prisoner to my own toxic thinking. The ceiling became my confidant, the silent witness to my nightly torment. Sleep, honestly, offered no escape. When I did manage to drift off, my dreams were filled with anxiety. I would dream I was running, but my legs were stuck in thick mud. I'd dream I was trying to scream for help, but no sound would come out. These weren't just bad dreams. They felt like a continuation of my waking nightmare. I would wake up with my heart pounding. A sense of dread already settled in my stomach before I was even fully conscious. The night offered no rest, no respite, only a deeper descent into the darkness that had consumed me. This nightly ritual of anxiety and self-loathing left me feeling completely disconnected from myself. It was like my mind and my body were two separate entities, at war with each other. My body was screaming for rest, for peace, for just a moment of calm. but my mind refused to quiet down. It was a cruel and relentless tormentor. I began to fear the night, to dread the moment I had to turn off the lights and be alone with my thoughts. The four walls of my bedroom, once a place of safety and comfort, had become the stage for my private, nightly horror show. As much as I tried to hide, people just didn't give up on me. My mum called every day. My best friend showed up with soup, and sometimes they just sat with me in silence. Their kindness felt heavy, like a weight I didn't deserve. But in my darkest moments, their quiet presence was a lifeline, reminding me I wasn't alone. I thought the breakdown on the kitchen floor was rock bottom. I was wrong. Rock bottom, it turns out, can have a basement. The struggle spiraled downwards, numbness replacing pain. I felt detached, lost in a void, convinced I'd never feel joy again. Stranded in the basement of rock bottom, I surrendered to emptiness, never knowing that this surrender would make me look up. After hitting my lowest point, I noticed a single weed pushing through a crack in the garden outside. Defiant, blooming where it wasn't wanted. It was just a weed, but it survived against all odds. For the first time in months, I felt a flicker of something other than despair. Even in broken places, life finds a way to continue. My partner came home and instead of talking, just held out my old trainers. "Just 5 minutes," he said gently. Leaving my safe zone felt impossible, but I took the shoes. That 5-minute walk was one of the hardest things I've ever done. When we got back, I felt relief. I had done something. A tiny victory, but it was mine. My partner didn't make a big deal out of our walk. Just, "Same time tomorrow?" I dreaded it, but I kept going. Each day, a 5-minute walk became my tiny anchor in shapeless days. Slowly, I noticed things. A neighbour's door, changing leaves, birdsong, shower, walk, tea. Structure, even small, helped me move forward, one step at a time. My best friend continued to visit. She'd bring films or magazines, things that required no real interaction from me. One afternoon, she brought over a huge, complicated jigsaw puzzle and tipped all 1,000 pieces onto my coffee table. "I thought we could try this," she said, her tone casual. I just stared at the chaotic mess of cardboard. It looked like my brain felt. It was overwhelming, a jumble of disconnected shapes and colours. My first instinct was to say no, that it was too much, that I couldn't possibly face it. It felt like another task I was destined to fail at. But she didn't ask me to solve it. She just started looking for the edge pieces, her movements calm and methodical. She'd occasionally slide a piece towards my side of the table, a silent invitation with no pressure attached. Hesitantly, I picked one up. I turned it over in my fingers, feeling its smooth edges. My mind, for the first time in a long time, had a single, simple task to focus on. Find the flat edge. I found one. Then another. We sat there for over an hour, in comfortable silence, just sorting through the pieces, our hands occasionally brushing as we reached for the same one. Something about the task was incredibly soothing. It was a problem that had a solution. Every piece had a place where it belonged. Unlike my life, which felt like a chaotic, unsolvable mess, this was manageable. It was a problem I could literally get my hands on. The simple, repetitive action of sorting and connecting gave my anxious mind something to latch onto. It was a form of mindfulness, I suppose, though I didn't think of it that way. It was just a relief, a temporary escape from the relentless noise inside my head. We didn't finish the puzzle that day, or even the next. It stayed on the table for weeks, a slow, ongoing project. But that first session was a turning point in my connection with my friend. We had had a conversation without a single word being spoken. She hadn't tried to fix me or cheer me up. She had simply found a way to sit with me in my struggle, to share a space and a task, and to let me be exactly as I was. It was a profound act of acceptance. It taught me that support doesn't always have to be about talking. Sometimes it's just about showing up and helping someone find the edge pieces. The small sparks were accumulating. I hadn't sung in months, but a quiet voice inside me remembered the joy it once brought. One day, I listened to that voice and joined a community choir, terrified but hopeful. As my voice joined the others, something inside me unlocked. It was the sound of me, a spark breaking through the silence. The choir wasn't a magic cure, but it was a brick in a foundation I didn't know I was building. I started to see my days didn't have to be a grey fog. Small routines, walk, shower, tea, became my first architectural drawings. Choir practice became a new pillar in my week. Each puzzle piece that clicked into place was a tiny victory, teaching me patience and self-kindness. The architecture of my days was simple, but it held me up while I learned to stand again. My old life was all about climbing the mountain of career success. Promotions, pay rises, recognition. When that mountain crumbled, I thought I'd failed. But I learned life isn't just about summits. It's about finding meaning in small, quiet moments, like a walk, a call with my mum, or finishing a puzzle. My new summits are invisible to the world, but they're infinitely more meaningful, about well-being, gratitude, and being truly present. The choir was my first step back into the world, a safe, supportive place. But facing work again was terrifying. I dreaded writing my CV, afraid of rejection and feeling like a fraud. My friend said, "You just have to be willing to be a bit awful at it." That gave me permission to be imperfect. I wrote a terrible CV, but it was a start. I applied, got rejected, and survived. Now, I remind myself, it's okay to be learning, okay to be imperfect. Rising up wasn't a straight line. It was like learning to walk in a thick fog. Some days, the mist cleared and I felt hope, a sense of progress. But setbacks would roll the fog back in, making me doubt everything. Healing isn't linear. It's a messy, unpredictable dance. I learned to trust the path was still there, even when I couldn't see it, and to hold on until the fog lifted again. My old life was a manicured, high-maintenance garden. It was all about impressive, showy blooms that required constant attention and a very specific set of conditions to thrive. When the conditions changed, the whole garden withered and died. As I started to rise up, I realized I didn't want to replant that same garden. I wanted something different. I wanted a garden that was resilient, that could withstand a storm, a drought, or an unexpected frost. I wanted a garden with deep roots, full of hardy perennials and self-seeding wildflowers, not just delicate, hothouse flowers. This meant making different choices. I eventually did find a new job, but it wasn't the high-powered, high-stress role I would have chased before. It was a smaller role in a company with a better work-life balance. It paid less, but it gave me more time. Time for my choir, for my walks, for my friends. It was a conscious trade-off. I was choosing peace of mind over prestige. I was choosing to cultivate a life that could sustain me, rather than one that constantly drained me. This was a radical act of self-care, a complete departure from my old value system. The relationships in my life also deepened. The superficial connections fell away, and the ones that remained became stronger, rooted in the honesty of my struggle. I learned to be more vulnerable, to ask for help when I needed it, and to offer support that was about presence, not problem-solving. My connection with my partner, my family, and my close friends became the true bedrock of my life. I realized that this was the real source of my security, not a job or a bank account. My community was my safety net, and I started to tend to these relationships with the care they deserved. This new garden of mine is still a work in progress. There are still weeds to pull. There are still patches that look a bit bare, but it feels like mine. It's a reflection of who I am now, not who I thought I should be. It has space for shadows as well as sunlight. It's a bit wild, a bit messy, and infinitely more beautiful to me than the perfect, fragile garden I lost. The act of rising up wasn't about reclaiming my old life. It was about having the courage to let it go and plant something new, something stronger, something that was truly my own. Looking back on that time is like seeing an old photograph, blurry and painful at first, a reminder of struggles. But now I see those scars differently. They're not marks of weakness, but proof I was wounded and healed, like gold lines in kintsugi pottery. My scars shine, not with perfection, but with resilience. They connect me to others and make my story worth telling. For most of my life, I thought wealth was about my salary, my job title, and the approval of others. Losing my job changed everything. I learned true wealth isn't what you earn or own. It's the resilience inside you, the strength of your relationships, and the peace you find in small moments. That's the real definition of wealth. If you're in a dark place right now, I see you. You don't have to feel strong to be resilient. Resilience is built through small, stubborn acts, like getting out of bed, opening a curtain, or taking a breath. These tiny acts are your rebellion against the darkness. Remember that stubborn life force is in you too. Hold on, the dawn will come.